note saying that I am recording, and so that everybody that couldn't join us live can see the presentations later. So, and I will mute myself now.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is the tutorial on security, privacy, and trust in a government environment. So where we want to have a responsible innovations and governance in a government setting. So this, I am Vijay Atluri from Rutgers University, who is going to talk about the security aspect of it. And Yuan Hong is from Illinois Institute of Technology. He will talk about privacy. And Sune Chan from CUNY College of Staten Island, she is going to talk about the trust issues. So these are the three aspects that we are going to talk about in this tutorial. So just to give you a background on what we are going to discuss is, suppose if there are many government and other entities or organizations that they want to collaborate, we need to make sure that the security requirements or the security policies that are imposed by each organization are respected when you actually share data across the organizations. So whenever you think of sharing data, so you also need to trust that organization that it is giving you the right data from the right source, etc. And the results of the analysis are to be trusted. So these are the issues that we discuss in the trust aspect of it. And when you actually share data across organizations, we don't know who will have access to it. Even if they are allowed to access, we want to protect the privacy of the data owners, privacy of the data when you actually share. So this is what the privacy part of the tutorial we are going to discuss. I hope you will enjoy, and let me begin talking about the security aspects, and privacy, Yuan will talk about it, and trust, Sun Chen will talk about it. Okay, so let us see. You can stop me whenever you feel if you have a question. So this is more like a discussion rather than just a lecture. So please stop me and ask questions, or raise hand. So in this part, we are talking about why actually do we need to share information across government agencies and other entities. So I'll give you some motivating scenarios, and then we will see, suppose now you want to share information. What are the hurdles for sharing from the security perspective? Perhaps the different security regulations, rules that are imposed by each organization are the ones that are preventing us from sharing data. So we will talk about some of the technical aspects of it. There could be other non-technical issues of not sharing data. So that part we are not getting into. And we'll see what are the potential technical solutions that can overcome these hurdles. And then finally we summarize. So that is really the outline of my talk. So let us see. So whenever you want to share data, typically in an emergency situation or in a disaster setting, you want to form coalitions that are really formed in an ad hoc way, and organizations or government entities, they come together and they need to share data. I'll make this more clear in the motivating scenarios. So these are what we call as coalitions or cooperating organizations. And these are formed in a very ad hoc way based on the situation. And these are dynamic in the sense they come and go. Some organizations are part of the coalition and some may leave. So you have a group of organizations that they want to share information and data with some common goal or objective to accomplish. So that is, so where we call it as ad hoc because these are formed without any extensive time for planning or anything. So the members may come and go, that is why we call it as dynamic. So for example, there are many organizations. So for example, the bubbles will represent organizations. They may want to collaborate and share data, and based on the situation, one organization may disappear and only two organizations are part of the coalition. So I'm just giving you some scenario in a natural disaster scenario. So where, for example, let us say there is a hurricane or some storm that, let us say it's category 3 storm or something like that is about to happen. And then you can see the different government entities and other entities that are involved in sharing of the data. For example, the mayor's office, Red Cross, and you have different shelters, police, the FEMA. I mean, these are the organizations, of course, we wrote them with respect to, FEMA is one of the, that is in United States. So they want to share the data about supplies, what are the emergency plans, emergency supplies, what is the availability of staff at the shelters, who are the victims, and share the victims with the among the Red Cross, shelters, and so on. So as you can see, these are the different data that is being shared by the different entities. So all these organizations, because they came together in this particular natural disaster scenario, there is a need to share data. Okay, so there are more sharing here. Okay, and let us say, for example, there is a disease outbreak scenarios. For example, the COVID situation that we are facing today. So also we need to share data. Maybe FDA, CDC, the hospitals, Red Cross, police, FEMA, and all these entities, they may want to share data about medical supplies, drugs, tests, emergency crew locations, victims or patients, and all this information need to be shared across these organizations. And when you are actually sharing this data, that may not be so easy because these are all coming together. In a normal scenario, maybe this sharing is not allowed. But in case of an emergency situation like this, there is really these things, these organizations form into a group or coalition, and there is a need to share this data. So then, to make this sharing or facilitate this sharing, we need to respect all these organizations' security policies. For example, Hospital 1 and Hospital 2, they want to share data in this particular scenario, but typically these are competing organizations. They don't want to do this. So similarly, in a normal scenario, police may not share the data, their reports with everybody else, but in a situation like this, they probably do. So we have to respect the security policies of each organization and share the data only on the need to know basis, not to everybody in that organization, only to the people in that particular organization that are needed, that need the access. Okay, so if you are not in an emergency situation, in a normal setting, how do you give access to data? So typically you have different users 1, 2, 3, etc., and of different organizations, and you have to set up, accesses. So saying, oh, user 1, based on his ID, his or her ID, has access to this particular data. But to this particular file, to this particular record. So these are all previously defined or set them. You need to look at all the user IDs and look at all the resources that they want to share and set up these accesses manually. So that is current access control systems. That is what they mandate. However, as I mentioned to you, in an emergency situation, that is not possible because these are formed, coalitions are formed in an ad hoc manner. So you bring them, different organizations together, and then you need to have this sharing possible without having to look at who are the users, what is the data, and so on. But you want to have some generic guidelines on what can be shared. So let us see how that can be accomplished with the proposed solutions. So our objective is really automate and facilitate information sharing so that you respect the security of the organizations and you are sensitive to the case situation that the organizations may come and go. This is a dynamic situation. And this is ad hoc. These organizations or coalitions, they are formed without much of prior planning. Okay, so this is the thing that we want to accomplish. So in such scenarios, instead of the traditional access where you define which user has access to which resource, instead of that, people have actually proposed what is called an attribute-based access control. I'll talk about a little bit about this with examples. So this has become a very attractive solution that is really suitable not only for these ad hoc dynamic coalition settings, but also these are very good for cloud environments where data is stored in the cloud and you don't have to really worry about how you can define the access rules, but you define them in a very generic way based on the attributes of users and attributes of the resources. So this is suitable for a dynamic situation, and these are very flexible, scalable, and portable rules. And also they provide you with extremely fine-grained access, and when it comes to the maintenance and overhead, it is really, really less. And I will just skip this part about role explosion, but let us say about identity loss. So we really don't care about the IDs of the users, who is actually accessing, but we just care about what are the attributes of the users. So that is why it is very useful for cloud and collaborative coalition-based systems that we are talking about. So what is this attribute-based access control? This is how it looks. So typically a user is allowed to access a particular resource, this object. User is allowed to access this object. So the access control is defined based on the attributes of the users and the attributes of the objects and some contextual information about the environment. So these rules that which users possessing which attributes can access what type of objects and in what context is what is called the policy or a rule. So those rules are stored typically in this rule base, So that is the ABAC or attribute-based access control model. So I'll just give examples. Just stop me if you haven't followed anything. So this is the same figure, put it differently. So users have attributes, objects have attributes, the environment has environmental conditions, and these are the policies. And based on all of this, you make an access decision. So for example, I will just use this example, the second example. For example, instead of saying a particular John has access to a movie, we can say a user who is 21 years or older is allowed to view an R-rated movie. So look at this. These are very generic policies or rules that you come across in real life. So attribute-based access control's goal is to actually capture those real-world rules and can formalize them so that you can implement them in a very easy way. So this is how the rule is written. Age is an attribute of the user, which should be greater than or equal to 21. And the rating, which is the attribute of an object, that is the movie, it should, if it is R, that is rated R, and the type of the object is movie, then access is allowed. So for a user who does not satisfy this particular attribute condition, then he is not allowed to access. Is it clear to everybody? So similarly, you can think of many other policies like this. For example, there is another example is a cardiologist is allowed access to patient records of cardiology department during 6 to 9 a.m. So this is the environmental condition that I am talking about. It could be time, location, or maybe a situation that you are facing. So you can all contextualize and put that context in the rule itself. So you can say, oh, again, this is the environmental condition, and this is the attribute of the user who should be, whose specialty should be cardiology, and the role of the user is doctor. This is another attribute of the user. So if the user has these attributes, he or she can access the records of the patients from the cardiology department. So these are, as you can see, these rules are not specified based on user IDs or object IDs. These are very generic rules that are based on only attributes of the users, of the objects, of the environment. So these are typically the attribute-based access control rules. So other examples, for example, let us say in a natural disaster scenario, we have this policy saying any nurse is allowed access to pharmacy records of patients in emergency shelter during 6 to 9. So this means, so actually there is a time. So this is the situation is the context here. This is the environmental condition, and the role is the attribute of the user, which is nurse, and the record type is the attribute of the data, that is a pharmacy record, and the record of a patient. So this is again the object attribute. So this is a very generic rule saying that, so here we are not saying only the nurses who treated the patient. We are saying any nurse can access a patient record. In fact, we were indeed working with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey a few years ago, and Port Authority was asked to actually help with the Hurricane Katrina that happened a few years ago. So they were flown to Louisiana, and where these situations, they face these situations in real life, where people were moved to the shelters, but they didn't bring their medications with them. And they don't even sometimes know the names of the medications. And the nurses in those shelters, they wanted to actually give them the medications that are needed by these victims of the hurricane, but they don't have access to the patient records. So in those emergency situations, although this particular patient is not treated by that particular nurse in normal situation, but there are some nurses who are serving in that shelter, they should have access to the records of the pharmacy records of the patients. So this is a real situation, you know. So you can easily capture those type of generic rules in an ABAC rule, in an ABAC policy. Similarly, for example, in a disease outbreak scenario that we are talking about, we are in now. So in an emergency such as a disease outbreak situation, a hospital administration is allowed access to critical supplies status of another hospital. So typically this is not allowed, but this you can facilitate this. So as you are saying, you are not actually giving access to the data to everybody in the whole world, but only on the need to know basis based on certain attributes you are giving access. So this is the access control model that we think is suitable for such situations. But there is more to it. So it is just not enough if you state these policies, but if you are actually collaborating with the different entities in sharing data, perhaps you want to look at different steps. Suppose if organization A wants to share data with organization B, first if you want to see, are these access rules similar or equivalent? If they are not, if they are similar, of course we have no problem with accessing. But if they're not similar, then what do we do? We want to make sure that, or rather have some kind of a metric saying, some kind of an evaluation saying how similar or how dissimilar are they. So once we find out this aspect, we don't want to share data, but based on this similarity metric or somehow some kind of a measure that we have, then we can look at, can we reconcile these differences? And if so, how we can do it? And then maybe during that reconciliation process, maybe we want to change some of our rules or migrate to that reconciled rule. And so in that particular situation, you will have maybe a less secure policy than that of your original rule, but you have reconciled so that you can actually share data with other organizations. And you can, of course, go back to your original policy when the situation is normal, but we are talking about this emergency situation at hand, okay? So, I'm just, we have different slides that talk about these different steps that I'm talking about. So let me just go over some examples. So we'll talk about what do we mean by whether this policy is equivalent to the other policy. So how similar or dissimilar? We'll talk about some policy metric. I don't know if we will have time to go through policy reconciliation and other steps, but if you have
5 minutes, Vijay.
Okay, so let me just stop with policy equivalence with an example, okay? So before we do that, this is the how essentially all the rules have to boil down to. So here you're saying Alice is a user who has access to folder F in read mode. Okay. So for example, this is user attributes saying U1, U2, U3, U4. These are the users. These are the attributes of the users. Specialty is medicine, role is doctor, cardiology, etc. So U1 is actually a cardiologist and a nurse, cardiology nurse. Similarly, objects have these attributes. So based on this, let us say you have these rules. Only cardiologist, nurse in the cardiology department can access the patient records in the cardiology. So based on that, you can form these access rules. So that means saying U1, because she is a nurse and she is in the cardiology department, can access the patient record, maybe read, permission is read. So our equivalence policy looks like this. So let us say that these are two organizations, organization 1 and organization 2. And you have users and resources of organization 1 and users and resources of organization 2. So what we do here is apply the rules on organization 1 and get the access rules, which we call A11 and A12. Similarly, you do apply policy 1 on A2 and apply policy 2 on A2. So we say this policy 1 is equivalent to policy 2 only if A11 is equal to A12 and A21 is equal to A22. So that is when you say these two are equivalent. If they are not equivalent, they are different in some way. So I'll see. So these are the examples that I'm sure you have access to the slides. You can. I just made this example. This is how you calculate A11. This is A12. As you can see, both A11 and A12 are same. And similarly, A12 and A22, these are also same. So that is why these two are equivalent. And in the similarity metric, suppose if they are not similar. Now we want to see how similar or how dissimilar or how much is the overlap between the axes. So this is our metric for similarity. You compute all the axes of covered by policy 1 and all the axes covered by both policies. And the ratio of this is the similarity metric from the perspective of organization 1. So maybe I will just stop here and then take any questions. But as you can see, we have other slides that talk about how we can do reconciliation and so on. And in the end, actually, I have an exercise for you where you have, let us say this is organization 1. And these are the attributes of each user. This is organization 2, and these are the attributes of each user. Similarly, these are the attributes of objects, and these are the policy rules of organization 1, and these are the policy rules of organization 2. Now tell me if these two policies are equivalent or not. So you can do it as a homework. So there, we have actually a paper in 2019 International Conference on Information System Security. So much of our discussion is based on this. And the attribute-based access control is a standard, and you can see this standard on the NIST publications. So these are the main references. So I'll take any questions if you have.
Okay. For the sake of time, maybe we can use Discord for the question, and then maybe Vijay later you can go and then look for something to respond to. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you very much. That was very insightful and very detailed. You know how things are done in the real life. You know, so that's very good. Thank you very much. Maybe we can move on to the second
the next
part.
one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will stop sharing my screen and
Yuan will present. So our second presenter, Yuan Hong. Yeah.
Sure, I will present the second one. So
okay,
I'll share my screen. So, okay. Okay, so I will use like maybe 25 minutes or 30 minutes to finish the privacy part for this problem. So I'm from Yuan Hong from Computer Science Department of IIT. So like that's a very brief introduction to myself.
Yuan, I see two slides. First slide and next slide. Maybe you can change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to
Let me
another.
change the view.
Yeah.
I see.
I mean, if this is what you wanted, it's okay.
Oh no, I don't. I'm
yeah.
with like.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
How to change the view?
Click on swap. There you go.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So basically, that's the outline of like my presentation. I will like briefly talk about like the privacy concerns in this problem, and include like some overview on like the privacy laws and regulations in all over the world actually. And since I work on like the data privacy from technical perspective, I will give an overview on like privacy enhancing technologies which are already like deployed in real world. And so followed up by several cases, for example, like a video surveillance, and also in the current like COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so I'll start with like data and the AI big data. So basically for this page, I think it's very general. I think everybody can understand that. So we have a gross volume of data and also computer technologies. So we also have machine learning models used for developing like AI applications. So even in like a digital government, basically we use a lot of like AI models and machine learning now currently. And there are a lot of like opportunities and challenges. So we may need to address several problems in that, in particular like privacy concerns in this presentation. So I will cover that part. So the applications will be more, since we have data, and there are very different kinds of data might be used by different agencies. So they use the data to develop like to use the models for learning knowledge, for extracting information for AI applications. So for example, like we can use the applications for like get like statistical correlations from like a genomic data, and many government agencies also use like applications to collect like aggregated statistics for from like many different kinds of data. So for example, like medical records and or web analytics. So these data, of course, they will result in privacy concerns. I will talk about that very soon. So in currently, like for example, like in during like the COVID-19 pandemic, so our data might be shared like from different ways. For example, from our mobile devices, that can also result in privacy concerns. And but such kind of information can be used for like better for different applications for identifying like for example like the spread like of like the epidemic, and also like for intrusion detections, for security purposes, so on and so forth. So many different applications we can use to analyze data. And for data mining, machine learning, basically they are very commonly used in everywhere. So our data might be collected by different agencies. For example, like Facebook, they use our data for ads. So that can result in some privacy concerns as well. So let's applications here. So and specifically for responsible innovations and the governance, we do have several cases I will talk about. For example, like online behavior tracking, as I mentioned just now, Facebook can be example for such kind of case. And in real world, basically our our data might be collected in some ways. We even for our users or like individuals that may not be aware of. For example, like our faces might be captured like on the street for video surveillance or like criminal or like terrorist investigations. And for medical data, basically it's very standard because our privacy is protected by several laws, for example, HIPAA. But we need to have the data recipients have to receive the concern from our patients or from like generic users to violate analyze the user or the data or like share the data to the third party. So in those kind of applications, basically they are literally resulting in privacy concerns. And specifically for like in online tracking and behavior profiling, in this case, you can see like in real world, we have several like privacy concerns or that have been raised already. So for example, like a DC metropolitan metro wants to track like riders, tracking them, for example, like for advertising revenue. Then they generate revenue by using the data or share the data to like third parties. And according to the FTC STAR report, then they can find out like that describes the online tracking technology has been used for linking consumers' activity through smartphones, like laptops, tablets, and other devices. So our users are basically like sometimes the information cannot be correctly like protected in with that can raise privacy concerns in that case. And Facebook, that's a very famous like issue. Like Facebook like was involved in like a scandal like recently about to share the data to third party, and they also use the data for advertisement for sure. And you can search from like a Google to get like a Facebook pixel, like this kind of script can monitor user behavior for marketers. So even like other parties, they can use like such kind of like a script to collect more user data. So that's for online tracking and profiling. Basically, our individuals can be like profiled by different agencies. So that of course results in privacy concerns. And for the surveillance case, basically like many governments, they have like they have arbitrary like permissions to conduct like surveillance for security purposes. But now and they have already like deployed several like applications for surveillance, like for security purposes. And the recent like GDPR, like I will talk about that regulation very soon. So that can basically articulate like the definition for surveillance, like the privacy concerns in certain cases. So for example, for generically using the data, basically, okay, so our users, our data should be like protected. But in case of, for example, in case of like surveillance, so for security purposes, our data, like for example, for like general users, our data should be protected in some case. But for example, like some criminals, their privacy may not be necessarily protected, which is defined in GDPR as well. So in this case, we need to separate like the general users and illegal activities with like from different outliers in the general public. And for in healthcare systems, basically you can find like our data is like should be well defined to share for sharing. And data is very useful in that case, like researchers can use patients' data for developing more better like knowledge, or like to get more get a new medicine for better treatment and so forth. And in COVID-19, basically is very well known right now. We can find out like our individuals might be so the behavior and locations should be very important for like the government to track like individuals to prevent the spread of like the COVID-19. So we need to find a good solution between like how to use the data and while preserving the privacy in that case. So I will show you like some examples about like current applications of like in case of like COVID-19 for preserving privacy while tracking individuals. Okay, so and in all those cases, you can find there's a trade-off between privacy and utility. So sometimes we need to sacrifice some like privacy for better utility. Sometimes once we need to preserve privacy, we need to sacrifice some utility. But there's a good trade-off between these two we can find out. And in some cases, we can also even trade for a third like factor, for example, efficiency, to preserve both privacy and utility in that case. So that's like a very generous and a very well-known trade-off between these two while we're using the data and sharing data. Okay, so the next one will be about like the privacy laws and the regulations, I think like the first few laws are very well known globally. So even for like in outside the US, basically like HIPAA might be very well known as well. So it's like to preserve like the medical data, and FEPA in like education system, basically we like students like information might be and should be protected. And ECPA and PPA, these two are defined for like for general like communications. So for example, our emails, so it's defined when, for example, as a good example can be used in law enforcement. So when in law enforcement, they want to like use the data. So to, for example, to investigate an email, the headers of email can be, so they need to request a court order for that or subpoena. And but once they need to investigate like contents of the email, they need to request a search warrant. And for so in that case, those are well defined in these two like privacy laws. So recently, like the GDPR, so is quite popular. So General Data Protection Regulation. I will use the next page to discuss this new like a regulation, and also like CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, which both are enacted in 2018. So GDPR, so there are several definitions from for the privacy protection in GDPR. So basically, the most traditional one is like to protect the individual data. So for example, our data, like emails, physical address, or like new identifiers, such as IP addresses, or like other personal information, those should be well protected. So such kind of protection is also defined in other like privacy acts. And in GDPR, basically, we also need to know something more about like protection. So for example, to guarantee like a transparency of the data processing. So for example, transparency means like if our data is shared, okay, so between different parties. So then like the organization shouldn't let like the data, like the users know that, okay, that data should be shared. And in that sense, in some case, and they need to get like concern from like users. So they cannot do that like quietly. So in that case, like you can see like a fairness in the matchup between data processing and its description should be defined for like the data processing. And the third part about like GDPR to define in GDPR is like to prevent and detect a data breach. So to evaluate on a like periodical basis. That means like, so there are several data breach cases in real world. And once you search from Google, you can find a lot of like incidents related to like a data breach. So in that case, the government, like also like the agencies or like organizations should be like responsible to like, for example, to detect and prevent data breaches in some to some extent. Okay, so that's GDPR. And then the next part will be more like about techniques, but I will think due to the limited time, I'll give a very overview, like a high level overview on the privacy enhancing technologies. So the first type of like technology generally used like will be called as like a privacy with secure multi-party computation. Means like because we have data are so there are different parties, each party may have their own data. So, but traditionally, if we don't care any about the privacy, so we can let them okay to share the data or just share all the data from three parties from here to like the external party, which is trusted. So, but in reality, like all the like parties are trusted. So in this case, like researchers or like have proposed several models to like securely analyze the data without sharing them. So by considering, for example, considering the AI application or like a data analysis or like a machine learning model as like a function that all the parties would like to compute. Okay, for example, to make a global decision. And in this case, like they can build like the protocol like to provide like approval, security, and privacy in that case. So in most cases, they use like applied cryptography to encrypt data, and the analysis can be performed on the encrypted data to guarantee like the same results as analyzing original data. So without like seeing the details by all the parties. So that means like in such kind of technique, like only like the protocol only reviews like output, like or only the share of the output to each party. So they don't need to like share the data in this case. And in this case, like both privacy and utility can be guaranteed, but they trade off like they sacrifice several efficiency because they need to encrypt the data. So let's like the first kind of like a technique is called as SMC, secure multi-party computation. And then more specifically about this technique, we can find out like if we can define like the models, for example, AI models or like data mining and machine learning models as like a function. So, and then we need to securely compute the function using the inputs. So the inputs will be the data from different parties in this case. So, and in this kind of protocol basic design, basically there are several different like models, like with which we need to consider about the adversary risk. So it means like, okay, we have third parties and they have the data. So what kind of like a behavior they may have to like infer the data from each other, or they want to like corrupt the protocol. So that means like the most basic one here is like a semi-honest model. Means like all the parties, okay, they have the data, we design a protocol for them. So they need, so semi-honest means like they are partially honest. That means like they are honest to follow the protocol, but they are curious to learn like the information from other parties. So that means like all those adversary parties, they just want to like compromise the privacy. They don't want to like corrupt the protocol by like, for example, faking the information or so forth. And malicious will be more advanced. That means like adversary parties can deviate the protocol in an arbitrary way. Means like they can, for example, like change the data. They want to like compromise the data integrity, so on and so forth. And they may create a protocol. They may collude with each other. So that will be more advanced. So that different like adversary models we need to investigate once we need to propose like a SMC protocol for securely computing the information without sharing the information, securely computing the results without sharing the information. So in this case, like the protocols can be like designed to have like so have input parties and output parties and computing parties. Computing parties sometimes like that can so it's not like a trusted party like established in this way. So it's just like sometimes they can only observe some like encrypted information as well in this case. And output parties can be the input parties as well. So they can like just establish a protocol among themselves to get the information and to compute a function without knowing the information. Okay, so that's the first one. The second kind of like very popular privacy enhancing technologies was invented in and inspired from statistical databases. And this is very commonly used in real world, like in industry, in government agencies, so on and so forth. And for example, like we have our persons can have like our records in like in the data set, and the data might be collected by third parties or like those parties are called as like data collectors, and the data. So those parties, they hold the data, and the data can be shared to other parties for analysis, but in that should be in a private way. So that means like the individuals cannot be identified from such kind of data even if like the third parties they can possess like a lot of like a background knowledge on the individual. Okay, so the next one will be, so based on the statistical databases, like there are two goals in this case. Again, similar to like previous like a trade-off between privacy and utility. And there's like, it means like an individual should be protected. Means like, okay, the individuals, even if the individuals is not like in the data set, okay, the data should be very, like the overall statistics should be closed. So that's a kind of protection. And utility means like the statistical information should be very useful for analysis. Means like, for example, if we need to collect some statistics, like the data should be close to like the results should be very close to like the original analysis results. Okay, so because like if we need to sacrifice some utility, means to preserve more privacy, means sometimes we need to obfuscate the data a little bit. And in that case, but we cannot do that too much. Means otherwise the data will be useless, and we can once we ruin the data, then actually that's very useless to like an AI application will be like useless anymore. So in this case, then we can investigate such kind of like framework for sharing data. For example, orange data, then we have privacy mechanisms as for data collectors. So they can generate like a statistics to the data analyst. So once they request the data via several queries. So based on different queries, they can actually use the data like in a private way in their machine learning models. Okay, so let's statistical data privacy and the definition of privacy is like a very commonly like in use now and in even in both industry and academia. And so this kind of terminology was and technique was proposed by Dr. Dock in 2006. So that such kind of technique is like is based on like a randomization mechanisms. So for example, like so let's suppose there's a data set here. There's a lot of data set here, which is called as labeling data. It means like so it means one user, any user is removed from the data set. You can see it here, or adding any user into the data. So there are two data here. So we apply the same algorithm. Okay, we apply the same algorithm, we get a very similar results. Okay, so that means like a data analyst right here as an adversary. So that party cannot differentiate these two results. Means like, okay, once we get a result here, they are indistinguishable. That means like the adversary cannot infer if the additional user is included in the orange data or not. So if this happens, then that means like a privacy can be protected because the adversary cannot identify if, okay, so for example, Alice here is not included or included. So, and this applies to all pairs of like the inputs, and that differ in only one record. So that's basic idea of differential privacy. So which can be very helpful for like for releasing statistics while preserving the privacy of individuals. And that's based on like a very standard way to do so is like to inject Laplace noise into like statistics. And based on investigating different sensitivity of the function and so on forth, like the protection to make such kind of like indistinguishability happen to make it like, so for example, let's say algorithm here to apply the data, apply the algorithm M to D, okay, and also apply the algorithm M to the same, so to another neighboring data D prime. So they are D and D prime, they differ in only one record, and that record will be protected. And this happens to all cases of D and D prime. That means all the users can be protected in this way. And that means like the output of results, okay, in the range of the algorithm C here. So for both cases, and these two probabilities are very close. That means like they are bounded by e to the power of like epsilon. So it means like as like an attacker, they cannot identify, okay, if the current results is from D or from D prime. So if this can be ensured, then that means like all the single records can be protected in this way, and based on some distribution like from the statistics. Okay, so that's differential privacy, and differential privacy has been like adopted in like major tech companies and government agencies. For example, U.S. Census and the Bureau, and so in Microsoft, for example, like Microsoft has proposed like a privacy integrated queries PinQ to this can be used to function many different machine learning and data mining algorithms to privately analyze the data by breaking down like the algorithm into several queries and inject noise into the queries. So, and differential privacy, including the most recent notion of local differential privacy, is good for analysis and training machine learning models on sensitive data, and the individuals can be protected in that way. And the next page, I will briefly talk about like local differential privacy. This is even newer. So differential privacy has been proposed for almost like 15 years, and local differential privacy is the current one. So which has increased like the threat model again. So it means like all the data can be locally perturbed in devices. So it means like so in differential privacy, in a traditional generic like a centralized differential privacy, that means there's a data collector. For example, hospital, they need to like inject noise into data before sharing them. And for local defined privacy means like we can do our local perturbation of the data everywhere. And this has been deployed in real world based on random response. And so for example, our Google Chrome browser, like Apple iOS and Microsoft Windows, Snap, Snapchat, all of those like companies, they have deployed this to convince the users like that they can use the data like correctly. So and that's based on random response. So it means like, for example, if we have visited any web page, okay, so the data will be randomly responded to like in the mobile devices to like the company, and so you may ask one question. Okay, so for example, why the data is randomly responded, that can still be useful by Google, for example, or Apple. So because like in this case, like a random response that can happen to in each single device, but the general statistics can be guaranteed because sometimes like those companies, they need to release the data to like a third party, like in a more aggregated way, not in like a single record. So if that happens, like an overall distribution can be still guaranteed by random response. And there's a formal definition for local differential privacy to preserve like the privacy of each single user, and also they can be shown to be provable secure by LDP. So, and the LDP is the state of the art in 2020 so far. Okay, so let's local differential privacy, and now I will talk about several case studies about like the how to preserve privacy in real world. So for example, a video privacy case is like is in surveillance or in traffic monitoring. Those can result in privacy concerns of individuals, or even like drivers here, and so several techniques have been proposed to preserve the privacy of those individuals while using the data. So because there are several the privacy concerns can be from like the single objectives. For example, like what kind of the objects detected in the video, and then the locations and also the activities inside the video. Okay, so with the video privacy, like the first approach is like proposed to like obfuscate like the video. So for example, here is the frame of the video. So and the video in this technique, so which was proposed like 10 years ago. So like they split like they generate like a different shares of those like an image, for example, the video. So and we have RGB pixels of for different pixels in the frame. Okay, so but if we have like general random shares of those like of that frame, we can find out like those shares can be like totally like useless, like apparently here. So but useless means like we can like the attackers cannot easily identify individuals from such kind of like randomly generated shares. But overall, like those parties can still like use like analyze the shares like globally using like in a private way. So that means like, for example, in this case, like the vehicle can be tracked from, okay, so in the video, even if like the vehicles is not like, okay, it's not, the privacy can be protected in this way because we can still see the trajectories of the car inside the results, but we don't know which car it is. And this kind of protection is good for like a general traffic monitoring. For example, we can count like how many vehicles that can that have visited any specific like location, or like from in different in what way. But it's not good for like for example like a criminal investigation. So because of a criminal investigation, we need to attribute like the different like vehicles. And in this case, we can like combine this kind of utility of the data together with some like surveillance videos. So because like based on BCPA, if like the search warrant can be issued, like the raw video can be still like released to like the law enforcement for investigation in that case. Okay, so the next one is like, for example, like if our video owners, outsource our videos to the cloud. That happens very often in real world. And if the third parties, they need to like for example, to analyze the video using some algorithms. So a protocol can be established for them or for all the parties to just encrypt the video and analyze the video. But the video is very huge, basically like the size is very large. So encrypting every single pixel is not practical in real world. So the recent approach proposed for encrypting the videos for an external analysis without compromising the privacy is like to extract the key points from the video. So for example, there's a frame here. So we can identify several key points that can be used to extract the features from the video to get accurate regulation. For example, to regularize this video is from which place, or like for what kind of like activity, and what kind of like objects that can be regularized in a video. Okay, so and based on such kind of key points like privacy, and those key points are also encrypted. So that's why like the adversaries, even if they use the video, analyze the key points, they cannot like identify individuals from the encrypted data. Okay, so
Yuan,
yeah.
If you don't mind, we can wrap it up.
Okay, so sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so like this is like the video case, and the third one is like to make them individually like indistinguishable. And next, the last case here is about like a COVID-19 pandemic case. So like there are two applications that have been proposed like recently and deployed recently. So for example, by Google, they propose like the community mobility reports, like based on location history. We use Google Maps, and of course, in this case, they need to preserve the individual privacy. So differential privacy can be used, has been used in such kind of location history aggregation on the locations. And the next application has been developed by MIT to use like a privacy preserving COVID-19 contact tracing application to identify, so for example, to inform users, individuals who should be get tested and self-isolate. So while preserving the privacy of them, like by assigning random numbers in that case to identities. So they don't know like each other, like by who visited where, but they can get the results like, okay, if they need to seek for like a test or like to get a self-quarantine. Okay, so like less application based on like which is similar to like Apple's Find My iPhone, like so on forth. So that's like privacy used for that. And the last page is about like an assignment. You can take a look to explore your Facebook privacy settings. So for example, like that's quite interesting. You can find out how you are profiled by Facebook to send you different ads, and also to collect different like real world data breach cases for all those. So since time is very limited, so I just present like a very like in a fast way. Okay, so thank you for joining the talk, and I would like to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuan.
Yeah,
this was wonderful. And I think you have some questions in the chat box. Maybe later you can answer to them in the Discord, or even with the, Discord has a voice, communication channel too. So you can discuss further.
Sure, we can discuss.
Okay. At this moment, I would like to see if anybody in the participants wants to take a break, or you would like to go ahead. Please say something on the chat box, please, or video. Yeah. No opinion? Okay, so we'll move on. No preference. Okay, great. Okay, so I think we will, I will share the screen now, and we will go to the part number 3, which is, hold one second, how do I share?
Yeah, I'll stop my share first.
Okay, great. Okay, now I'll share my screen. How do I do that? Okay, which one is it? Is this the one? Yeah. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to get to the presentation mode. Okay. How do I, yeah, okay, great. All right, so this is number 3, the part talking about the trust in intelligent society, which is machine-driven society. Oops, what did I do? Sorry, okay. All right, trust in people. When you are talking about I trust him, what do you mean by that, right? So we rely on them, we can rely on them, or we can confide with them comfortably, and we feel safe with them. That is a basic, you know, the understanding, very fundamental understanding of what we mean by trusting somebody. But if somebody exhibits certain behaviors or characteristics, such as false identities, or deceiving who they are, and then speaking falsehood, or it's who is not, you know, fair, who steals something, or, you know, reveal somebody's secrets without any conscience, you know, and so on. Those are not a very good, you know, trustworthy person. That's what we are calling. So we call this one, that's for the sake of lack of the, you know, terms, we can say that this is trust risk, okay? Factors or characteristics. So now instead of talking about you know, people, let's go to the, you know, systems. In this case, the digital systems, that are computerized, you know, system. And because most of the institutions are interacting with these digital systems these days, we can call this system as a proxy of institutions. So how do we say that we trust certain institution like government, or, you know, e-commerce, Amazon, or something like that, right? So it's a similar kind of things. All these trust issues are coming up with these digital systems, and that shows false identities, and you know, who manipulates the, you know, the contents, and speak falsehood, or exhibit falsehood, or exhibit biases, exhibit you know, the unfair practices, and so on. These are all sort of the trust risk factors. Okay, so so we will talk about some of these factors, although we cannot talk about all of them, but we will talk about some aspects of these trust issues that are exhibited by these digital systems, or, you know, we call it intelligent systems these days, right? And then as you can see, this trust is a sort of a kind of social glue, and that without this one, society cannot be existing very well. We cannot trust banks, we cannot trust media, although we are seem to be getting into that direction, right? You know, our public trust in government is almost the lowest point at this point. And then the trust in government is, you know, lowest. One of the lowest one is the United States, after, you know, France. Okay, so that was some statistics just for your information. So this talk will talk about all these aspects, people, trust risks in people, identity, I mean, and then the risk in data and some algorithms that we know of, you know, and then risk about the, you know, institutions and the connected devices and so on. Okay, okay. So in terms of identity, when somebody says who they are, you know, they claim that who they are, we have to verify this person is correct or not. So there are some mechanisms to authenticating certain person. On e-commerce side too, you have to authenticate yourself, right? So those things are, you know, there is a technical methodologies like authentication methods such as a password, smart card authentication, biometrics, and behavioral authentication, digital certificates. And these days we go even multi-factor authentication, where these a combination of these methods are available. And we are relatively, you know, okay, even though there are still some many cases of these fake identities, right? But what about that data? So data in society is becoming a very new currency, as you know, and then because we are all deciding our decision based on data-driven society, right? And also social media and mobile phones are always there, and therefore the data is so easily accessible. in your pocket all the time, right? And that can influence your opinions on the world views and so on. So these are some of the dangers, this influencing factors, that contaminated information can mislead, and then it can confuse other facts, and it can even sway the public, election, voting decisions as well. So this is spreading a lot. So there are some topics that are being talked about: fake news, deep fakes, and social bots. These are some 3 aspects we will talk about, okay? So when we call this one the misleading information or false information, is sort of called as misinformation or disinformation, we call it. Disinformation is sort of intentionally manipulating the facts in order to deceive something. That is what people seem to be agreeing upon. Whereas misinformation in general, it is fake, inaccurate, relatively, including accidental ones, okay? And then there are rumors, and there is urban legend, which is a sort of exaggeration of the facts so that they look good, right? And spam and trolls, the trolls are users who post messages and deliberately, trying to be provocative or offensive. So there are certain techniques, available to have 3 different types. One is misinformation diffusion, studies, and the detection studies and intervention studies. Diffusions are like, how do we spread this, the misinformation that is in the network? So there are spreaders, clarifiers, and persuaders, and these kind of studies are being done. And then the detection mechanism is mostly trying to classify: this is misinformation, this is not, this is false, this is not false, and so on. Those are depending on the content or context or source of misinformation. We look at the authoritative sources and so on. So intervention is more like a, epidemic, it needs some kind of antidote or, the vaccine. Just like that, we try to immunize, sending warning signs of this being sent, or isolation or antidotes. Isolation is just like, suspend malicious, users, or antidotes are like a statement from relative authorities and saying that this is misinformation. So one of the examples would be censorship, right? Censorship is a strong way of preventing the false information being spread. Since it's a very heavy-handed way of doing that, but it is a very effective one, and we know some nation states are very good at it. And then there is fact checkers. Way of doing it is factchecker.org website or snopes.com. These are the ones who is actually verifying the falsehood or the truthfulness of the content. And then there is also Google Facts fact checks the search results. In other words, the search results actually shows that this was verified by the publishers, such as, or some some websites like snopes.com. So it's there are some categories, mostly false, mostly true, and so on. Those are being done. And in COVID situation, it's a disease pandemic, but there is also information epidemic, which is the spread of false informations are prevalent. A lot of the cases, as you can see, garlic can be very helpful. So a lot of Americans, say that where is this, think this main source of false or misleading coronavirus information. Their first choice was Trump administration. Second one is mainstream media, and third one is social media. Whereas second choice will be social media and mainstream and state officials. Okay, so this is interesting stats. So in this kind of situation, what is the way to prevent this kind of things? So have reliable data to be obtained, so that is one way of preventing is as we said, fact checking sites, or refer to the more reliable sources like NPR News, as opposed to some other yellow journalism sites. Politico is one of those, news sites, and medical sources also. WHO or CDC is more, and Johns Hopkins, right? This time it was really reliable sources we considered in this pandemic. And then there is also Ask a Scientist. This is a new, information. Instead of relying on somebody else's, information, you can actually ask network of scientists pose a question. One of them it will be answering, and this has been implemented in New Jersey state government. And there are certain, identified social media sources that are quite reliable. This is very important in order to best protect ourselves and our society. We need, good facts rather than falsehood running around, right? So, and then in the bushfire in Australia, also this Standard Royal Commission was studying how to prevent, what is the policy that we have to, make. And this study is showing, or this opinion article is showing, that instead of relying on small set of proxy, knowledge makers or Google website, try to utilize a set of reliable scientist studies who has been done a lot of work on it. Okay, so a reliable data source is one way of deterring mechanism. Another one is, in the social media, there are fake, not fake, very smart automated, software that pretends to be a social media account and acts like a human being. He's, imitating the human being and manipulate discussions and then spread misinformations and propaganda and so on. So what Davis and et al. These people have developed a bot or not detection system as a counter to this one. So they can actually determine whether this information is a social bot or not. Okay, so they used 1,000 features, and they have hit within 1.5 years after launching. They became very successful, and they decided to have bot meter to be installed, and then that's been currently in service. Okay, so this is determining whether a Twitter account exhibits similarity to the known characteristics of social bots, such as engineered social tampering, such as number of retweets, number of followers, and these are some of the telltale signs that there is this is a social bot rather than a human account. So this is a bot meter. You can play with that. I think one of the assignment is that you play with that and then talk about it. Another detection mechanism for false information or fake news is using machine learning. Okay, in the machine learning, as you know, relatively going through this general process, collecting data and pre-processing the data, and then splitting the data from training data and testing data, and then you train the algorithm, and then you have a trained, data, the machine, intelligent machine just created. And then that can be, measured or evaluated through the testing data, whether how much it's accurate and so on. So my student has developed this fake news detection algorithms, and he used several different models. He trained, and these are some of the accuracies. And then he developed, the web application based on that. So what you can do is you can cut out some of the news media article, and then you paste in there, and then you can actually select which model you want to run. Okay, and then one of the popular machine learning models, and then the output will be saying that this data set, trained model was using this kind of data set, and then it was using this neural network model, and then it's considered as real news, not a fake news. Okay, so you can also play with that. So there is a detection mechanisms on that. So as you can see so far, we talked about some data, fake news, and then many different approaches. One is fact checking, and the other one is, detecting the behaviors. And then third one is trained machine learning, and then using that one for detection purposes. And then let's talk about now another, fake, it's not a news, but the fake images and videos. So that's called a deep fake. And deep fake is considered as, deep learning and fake, together as called deep fake. And this is like a realistic looking synthetic photos are being, added to the video, the real video or images. And it looks like somebody else is actually talking something that they never ever talked about. So this is visual deception and audio deception. Everything goes in there. So what we see is not real, actually. Okay, so Mark Zuckerberg was claiming that their true goal is to manipulate and exploit the users. He never said that. And then President Obama was using bad language to describe President Trump, which he never did, right? So this is a big issue. So here, a big fake threatens to grow from internet oddity as a joke in the beginning to a widely destructive political and social force. And society needs to act now to prepare itself. That's what we all should be worrying about. And it was deepfake initially had a big hit with a porn site where the actually celebrity face was being synthetically pushed into the porn actors, and then that had a lot of users actually believed on that one. And then you can imagine how much of reputational damage that can be, right? And similarly, in here, political figures can be either be completely out of the election competition because of the fake news. And also some Gabon's president was being fake news that as if he's really sick, and some people were, some military was planning a coup d'etat on that one. Okay, so it can be a real problem, so information. Okay, you can play with those videos later. Okay, so deepfake applications are so easily accessible, meaning that it's so easy to use. You just upload your videos or images, and then you just wait a couple of minutes, and then they give you a fake deepfake videos or images. Okay, so these are some of the website deepfake web beta. And then Avenge Them, Zao, this is very popular in China as well, and there are many more applications like that. So the impact, as we saw, is very damaging. And then it can not only create distorting democratic discourse and manipulating elections and then eroding trust in institutions and so on and so forth, but it also creates a reality of apathy. That means I don't care anymore which one is true or false, because there are so many false of them, right? So it's just too exhausting. So they just don't become reactive anymore, what is true or what is not, which is quite dangerous, right? So these are all the warning from the politicians and the experts and so on, why we think we have to worry about this. So this deepfake is relying on this, again, generative adversarial network, deep learning, algorithm, and it has generating fake news component, and then detecting which one is fake or which one is not, a discriminator, classifier working together. And then in the end, it's a faking, the generator is faking so much, overwhelmed with fake news, the discriminator cannot function correctly. Okay, that is basically the underlying technology. But there are also mechanisms in technology-wise. We can create detection system, and they have done that. And then there is also a defensive approach, which means that certain images are being filtered out, certain features, so that they cannot actually easily fake. And there are softwares being available through PIC, deep trace, and these things are verifying whether this is authentic image or videos. Okay, so there are also laws against legal initiatives are there. California law and the copyright law, defamation law, the right of publicity, and so on. But these are taking some time for this thing, and also people can argue that I have a right to, you know, speak or express. Therefore, it's very difficult to enforce, even though it's possible. Okay, and then so what is the most you know, the effective one is this technology platform, the providers like Google, like you know, Amazon. They have a terms of service agreements. Okay, so that can be most important right now. Okay, and some tech companies are voluntarily trying to, you know, not use a certain trust risk digital, you know, systems, such as IBM just announced, right? What did they, face recognition technology, they will not work on it, they will not use it, and so on. So these are very effective at the moment. Okay, so that is related to the content and the data part. Of course, there are many more, but I cannot cover everything in this time frame. So let's go on with the, you know, this AI, trust risk in AI. We all know, we heard so many times about the AI being super intelligent being that may be you know, superseding human beings, and then it makes decisions on its own. Wonderful. However, they get into this kind of disastrous situations, like a car accident, and then there is a misdiagnosis and somebody dies, and so on. And there is no way of you know, coming out why did it happen, you know? So that is a big question, and who is responsible, right? So that is a big issue. That is so-called the black box AI that creates confusion and doubts, and that can create a lot of you know, social what is it, uh, trust issues. Okay, so Apple Card here, gender discrimination. They did not give extra credit for the women against the men, and then you know, also black you know, facial recognition was a much, you know, higher error rate than the white man, and then you know, Tay, this one is disastrous. Chatbot, right? It starts talking race, many of them, and also AI perpetuate bias, because black box is AI is determining certain things and predicting, but we don't know why, how it happened, right? So that is a big issue. And also there is this big data bias issues, right? Systematic distortion in data that comprises its use for a task. So here data bias is exposed to, you know, exposed, and then that algorithm uses that bias and then acts like a biased algorithm, and that can be used by the business, and then it's also creating the real world that has a bias in it. So it's perpetuating. Okay, so that is this societal bias is embedded in behavior, can be amplified by these super intelligent algorithms. So how do we go about it? So people talk about XAI, which is explainable AI, and that is instead of a black box and then just the products, but rather you get the explainable AI product by having some algorithm that has a component that can learn from the feedback from the users, or feedback from the data or results, and so on. Okay, so that they can give you understanding why not, and then why succeed, why not, right? And so that can enhance the trust of the system, and then societal. So whole, you know, explainability by design is a life cycle where when we are training, when we are evaluating, when we are modeling, all these and deploying and prediction and monitoring, debugging, this all requires some kind of, you know, what is it? Uh, uh, awareness of this explainable AI that technology might be able to sort of enhance the trust in the digital system, as well as the institutions and the society in general. Okay, so there are a lot of laws against, what is it, discrimination for the human, right? Citizenship based, sex based, and disabilities, and these we have laws that are governing the human behaviors in terms of those risk, trust risks. However, these machines who can predict who is likely to go to, commit a crime again, and then he's repeatedly, having some mistakes on the predicting, biasing on one race to over another. Okay, so but there is no laws that are governing to that yet. Okay, but the GDPR and this guidelines, model risk management, and also California Consumer Privacy Act, these are all trying to carve some of the part in the automated decision makers have to be somehow explained to the end user. Okay, so here you said you have a right to be informed about the automated decision and ask for human being to review it. Okay, so that is exactly what the GDPR Article 22 is, going after. Okay, so and then the companies has to abide by that, when they are adopting these systems. Now let's talk about data sharing and collaboration. As Vijay said, we have to collaborate at some point, right? Whether it's the data, whether it's, in order to share the data, you have to have a policy set up in the beginning, or you have to dynamically, agree upon those policies. So there are certain risk factors here. Some privacy risks, security, because private data I don't want to share with another one, and bias and quality, low quality data I don't want to share with them, right? Or the lack of value understanding or competitive advantage, right? Some people are competing. Why do I have to compete? Share the data with a certain other, companies with my own data. So these are some of the concerns and risk factors in collaborating and data sharing. But in the supply chain is one big example where many companies are involved and then collaborating with each other. And then in here we have one of the the example here is the e-pedigree information sharing supply chain, and that had the counterfeit drug issues, and it was increasing in the beginning of 2000 and later 2000. And then what FDA has done is that they introduced this visibility by using RFID technology and building this electronic product code EPC framework or infrastructure. So nowadays we also have a blockchain technology that can be also shown the visibility or transparency of the transactions, right? So these can be big issues. We know, we are aware of risk factors, but we are also aware of some of the technologies are being developed to enhance this kind of collaboration framework. And then we have tons of IoT, Internet of Things, and these are giving us a very convenient life. I can lock the door remotely. I can check the rice pot from remotely and so on. However, this also has lots of issues because these are all internet connected. These data can be leaked on and then used inappropriately, and then it can. So in other words, this is not a risk that it only pertains you. It is all related now, and the vast amount of IoT is being adopted by the smart city and smart health, smart work, and so on. These smart technologies are using it, and then they are collecting the data as well as using the data and making decisions, real-time decisions. And this is where it becomes very difficult to manage this 20 billion devices that are all connected. Okay, but there is no regulations for the time being. So what the industry leaders have done, Online Trust Alliance group has came up with this trust framework, and that has a lot of guidelines for the manufacturers and service providers, and guidelines to providers, the purchasers and distribution channels, and guidelines for the policymakers. Okay, so that is where we are at. However, two studies over here that I found was trust issues in IoT world. We have to rely on the device itself. That device has to be reliable, and also there should be human-centric approach. Might be much more so that we have control over how to manage the issues if there is issue arises, and then who do I have to delegate the responsibility or the issues to other people. For instance, the electric grid had some issues that I detected, then I should be able to rely on the electricity company to handle this ones. Okay, so those trust network is very important. So in conclusion, we have seen many of the trust eroding or trust risks, and biases, falsehood and revealing secrets, and deceiving and stealing, and then not sharing, no transparency and explanations, and so on. But we need a lot of legal framework is being currently worked on, and also more research, not only just technical approaches that I have shown, but many social scientists have been have to be dig into this, the real dangers, and what impacts, and then what might be the actual impact, right? And those empirical studies are also very important. And then a lot of education is needed. We have to have a very critical view of these new emerging technologies and try to build a trust. Okay. And then the human-centric, what am I doing? Yeah, sorry. So in other words, in the end, we want to have a fair system, authentic system, private, preserving system, secure system, and sharing and transparent and explainable systems that can represent some of the institutions. If we believe in, if we can trust the digital device, the systems, then we can trust some of the the adopting institutions, and that institutions will build a society that is more reliable and more trustworthy. Okay, thank you. And then I would like to point out that we have accompanied the questions and the hands-on exercises. So we will post that one in the Discord, and then please do your homework and then discuss, and then I can grade if you want. Thank you. Hello?
Hi, Sun. How are you?
We're okay, here. Sorry. I thought I was dangling. I thought I was kicked out. Yeah, sorry.
No. We're still here. So, do you want to take some minutes, maybe, to respond to some questions from the audience?
Yes, of course. Yeah, if there is anybody who wants to pose any question, please turn on your microphone and start talking. Yeah, or raise your hands if you want. Otherwise, we can meet in Discord. I think Lonnie asked 2 questions for Yuan.
Yeah.
And he said, she asked, due to privacy concerns and regulations, not enough data is available to study the spread of COVID-19 in US. So what your thoughts are?
So I think she left, but I can still answer the question.
She got tired of it.
Yeah. I will email her about answer, but I will talk about it here as well. The answer.
Okay.
So basically, I think machine learning, the first question is about machine learning to enable predicting an individual from randomized data. So to predict the individual, so in this case, we need to encrypt data. So because most of randomized algorithms, that's based on aggregated information. So there will be not for predicting for personalized recommendation. So for if we design for example the secure multi-party computation protocol, then we can accurately predict that based on the data. But the data may not need to be randomized in that case. So we just need raw data for analysis. So and if it's randomized, basically, so current that's a very good question. Basically, current LDP is based on randomization of the local data, and so there's a current research to to work on like predicting individuals like for based on LDP models, but it's still under like a research. So in this case, yeah, that's a very good question. And the second one is like due to privacy concerns and regulations, not enough data is available to study the spread of COVID-19 in the US. I agree with this opinion. So with privacy concerns and regulations, basically we can, even if we are willing to share the data, we may not be able to do that all the time. So that's why we need to like integrate our like privacy preserving techniques with like by complying with the regulations, and also to build a bridge between like the policies and like the current techniques on privacy preserving in like for example by complying with HIPAA, for example, and the two techniques I have mentioned in the presentation about like a privacy preserving tracing, individual tracing, and the other one is like aggregation of like a Google report based on locations of like people visited, like using Google Maps that can. So different privacy can provide a very strong guarantee for individuals in that case. Things that's not related to every single person. I think that should be okay to provide a very relatively accurate results, especially like even if you have a small group of people who participate in like the serve in an application. So as a general sample of the whole population, I think the results can be relatively like accurate for aggregation. But for individuals, is still under research. Like for individuals, this current solution is like, for example, as I mentioned, it's like based on encryption. That takes more time. And for in this kind of during this kind of like COVID-19 like pandemic, like time is also essence. So we need to like find a good trade-off between all those three, like privacy, utility, and the efficiency in that case. Yeah, that's a good question too. Yeah.
Good answer too. Yeah. This is a real situation where a lot of researchers in the past, had not enough data being available. Now, with the Open Data Initiative, we have a lot of data available, but the critical medical data still, or health data, is very under their, the wall. Let's put it this way.
Exactly. So I will email her about the answer.
Yes. I think that the contact tracing technology that you have used, that was using some random numbers, and also in Singapore they are also using that contact tracing very innovative way without anonymized data, and that seems to be doable. But then still privacy of individuals are a big issue. Okay.
So I have a quick question. So you were talking about all these fact checkers. But then, so do you think that these fact checkers can somehow in the future limit freedom of speech? Because at the end, you can always have an opinion of things. Or how do you manage opinion versus fact in these fact checkers? Because most opinions will be deemed as not fact, right?
Right. So that is where the borderline. How do we define the facts versus opinion, right? So, but when you are looking at the text, or even in the news articles, even though the journalist trying to portray the facts as a factual events, they sometimes insert their own opinions in there as well. Okay. But in other areas, it's much more of opinion, like op-eds, right? Those things they have very opinionated statements are going there. So there is not only fact checking, but also how much of subjective phrases are there, how much of opinions are expressed in this one. So in other words, you have opinionated detection system, let's put it this way. So, and then you can go over and then try that if this one is very opinionated, maybe it's likely. So it's not like a false versus fake versus true. That is very dichotomy, black and white, but you can have degrees of, this rating system. Actually, that one of the fact checker Snopes.com has many labels in there. So it's like false, and then mostly false, and then mostly true, mostly true, but also there is opinionated. Okay, so if that is 80% of the time it's opinions expressed, then it can be classified as its own category. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Jack?
I have a question, if I may, about, well, for Soon, about making AI explainable. You were talking about, so within the context of trust and platforms and users, do you think there's a contradiction between making AI and the data explainable and the processes, and then the private interests of platforms like Facebook and Twitter? Can they align, or are they always going to be sort of opposed to each other?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Yeah, how much, I mean, in government, when we are doing, contracting with the government agencies, right? Let's say I'm a software, developer, and I want to sell something to the government. They have to certify, right? So these algorithms actually have to be verified and certified whether this is trustworthy or not. But we would like to go even much wider, so let it open the algorithm. We did with the data, right? With a certain, some fields we are still not available, like personal data. However, we do a lot of open data from the government, and then people are actually utilizing those things. So if the we have this open software, open source movement, right? That has actually created a very good culture of certain software being reused rather than reinventing the wheel. However, that also had a side effects, right? A lot of fake, or attack software is utilizing some of the previous attack, very simple, algorithms and so on. So there is not a very big, gain by opening this one. However, if it is the algorithm can in itself can learn how to explain how he arrived or it arrived its decisions. If he can say that, okay, I'm based upon this one fact-checking site XYZ, I did it. And then this is why I give you this decision rather than just spitting out this decision, right? That is much more reliable than the ones that are just speaking. This is not don't do it. And I'm saying, why? You have to give me a reason, because it can explain. So in other words, you can this computerized system who can act like a human being, then at least it should be able to explain its own behaviors. How did it arrive that one, right? So that is where we are trying to do, not because, I think that's where we are heading. The bad part that you are talking about, side effects of these companies will, share their, internal code. I believe not. However, the telltale signs of them being able to explain certain things, they are not probably going to share the code. However, they will be able to show that in their behaviors, interface behaviors or decisions, that they have some of the explanations that can be shared, right? That can be also shared by academically. They say that we use this kind of methodology, and this is how they arrive this kind of reasoning and explanations. I don't know if I answered your question, but
yes, thank you very, very much. If I could just ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Then, if companies keep their source code closed, and we're relying on these companies to tell us the process that was used without actually being able to check it.
Yeah, that is.
Does this resolve, or does it change in any way this sort of trust that you were talking about throughout your presentation?
Okay, so trust on this, the behaviors of this digital system can be a little bit enhanced, right? However, companies who are keep, doing that practice, however, if they are, I don't know, there should be an oversight, body, right? Who will be able to go and then see if these practices are being thoroughly, followed and so on. So some people, radical, approach would be just open source everything and then, let the citizens investigate, or let the, certain professional companies investigate and see if they are using biased data and build the model, or they are using the right kind of, algorithms that they are sampling. Certain algorithms are sampling some data set, and then that sample data is either biased or, unfair, right? So yeah, definitely we need to have some kind of but as we said, GDPR that was saying that we have a right to know how this decision has been arrived. So if we want to, we can demand them to explain it further, right? So yeah, but still, that's almost like a right to delete, right? That situation. So individuals have to fight forever to get that deleted. Individuals have to fight forever, probably get that answer to how these explanations are being arrived. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah. But I think little by little, with the technology-wise, we can actually make some difference, Yeah.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Luis?
There is a question in the chat box, so I think that is directed to you.
Yuan, yeah? No? To me?
No, for you.
Oh, I see. I have one question regarding AI trust and trust issue. Most of the developing countries lack of technology development. How the developing countries can protect their citizens from issues, fake news? Okay, so yes, that is a very good question, but this is where we also have to, there are many web-based systems that can be utilized for free. However, there are also, I'm sure there is partnerships of, with organization, NGOs, or some even, some companies who are willing to share their technology to be deployed in their countries. I think they might be able to, form some kind of coalition or partnership with those companies. Might be a way to do it. But the fake news and social bots, there are many, open source codes. Even introductory student, can make this kind of tools. So I think with some training it can be done. In a larger scale, we don't know, but they also have to have that infrastructure of who is the trusted sources, right, that they can rely upon. So if that has been already identified, maybe rely on that one first, right? So, and then they can actively involve in classifying by human whether this is fake or not. And also you can utilize collective intelligence, collective socially motivated people who are volunteering to do the fact checking. So that is another way of going about it, not only just adopting some of the technologies of machine learning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hello, three professors. I have a question for all of you. So this question is about, during this epidemic disaster, so the problem is that the community want to recover from this kind of virus impact. And they have to adapt some IT platforms, such as in China, we use QR code, right? Mm-hmm. So this QR code may trace everyone's identification number, cell phone number, trajectory data. So this is a balance of utility and privacy. But in this extreme context, the utility is life or death situation, right? So if you don't use that QR code, you may not go out your house. You may not get supplies, necessary supplies, something. So I'm wondering what's your opinion on, because governments have no time to respond to this kind of very quick disaster. So we don't have enough time to discuss the law or policy or mechanism. So now, right now in China, we are using those applications from big IT companies like Tencent and Alibaba Group. So citizens doesn't have no, we don't have other choice but to use them. And in China, it's also interesting that citizens seems to trust government and those big IT companies, right? So I want to ask, do you have an opinion on how the government to react adaptively or to this kind of situation? What's the role of government in these extreme situations? Thank you.
So who's
okay.
first?
I think the question is to you. Yeah.
To me? Or, okay,
Yeah.
You can go ahead first.
Yeah. So basically, like a privacy, like laws in different countries, they have different definitions. So that also like yes, there's a balance between like a trade-off between privacy and utility. That's why like so in different situations we may have different for example aims on privacy and utility. For example, in this kind of extreme cases, as long as like for example like the government can comply with like for example the privacy laws, so all the big companies can comply with the laws, then they can use the data as much as possible to save more lives, for example. That can be used, of course. Yeah. But in different countries, they may have different definitions. So in this case, maybe in the US, like compared to China, like citizens care more about privacy. So in this case, the solution might be developed more towards more about privacy. So compared to China in this case, but in general, like both countries, all citizens can actually, they may also have different like feelings about privacy. So in this case, so I think from the government perspective, to find the best solution is the best solution.
Yeah.
So find the best trade-off is the best solution. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's all about the trade-off in machine learning as well. You know, it's a trade-off. Performance is good, but then the trust goes sometimes go badly because. So I just want to make sure that one thing to be clear, that the platform companies like the Googles and, as you said, Alibaba, those companies, as I said earlier, that their service agreements and they are enforcing this one, and then we are in danger of saying that are these pseudo government companies, pseudo government institution, right? They are the ones who's setting the rule and enforcing the rules and all that, because they have the data, they have everything, they can do whatever it is needs. So there is a big danger of these big companies are becoming, acting like they are God, or acting like they are the government themselves, or a substitute of the government, and we are subject to nothing but following their rules too, because we have some services that we need very badly from them, right? So that is something we really have to be worried about as a social scientist, where our democracy is going. Is it in our hand, or is it in the platform provider's hand, right? Previously we only have to worry about government, who's going to be taking all the control, but now we are talking about these big companies are becoming fatter and also powerful, and that can be a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I have one point to add here. So about like, for example, the big companies. So if we have, for example, like we authorize our permission to like use to our data. So for example, using like a QR code, for example, for like for incident response in this case. Like that should be, so that's an automatic concern on using the data in current platform. But however, if the big company would like to share the data for other purposes, so for example, to like a third party for ads, for example, then they need to, in both China or like US and other countries, I think like there's a concern here. So like the government should be pay attention to, and also like to create some laws or like even like to follow some like regulations for such kind of data sharing. So in like all over the world, I think in this case.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to add that, in many cases, in these situations, governments and as well as people overreact to the situation, and, they are willing to sacrifice privacy for security. For example, 9/11 happened, nobody cared about privacy, So we had surveillance systems installed everywhere, and then, Europeans and everybody, they were so privacy proponents, they were willing to sacrifice their privacy, even though it is a security risk. Same happening now. Governments are overreacting, and they want to track and trace everybody. But it has to be done at a more fine-grained level. Rather than tracking everybody and everything. Maybe just do it only on the need-to-know basis.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I think there was a similar question here that travel restrictions, this kind of government measures that are being imposed suddenly due to the coronavirus outbreak and spread, and they cannot even travel anymore to any place they would like to. So how do we manage this one? Even now they might have been in the US for 1 year, but they still have some issues. So I think these government measures, strict measures like this one, or emergency measures, like a release of emergency fund, that's a positive side. So everybody do not complain that much, right? However, the sort of restriction is sort of limiting some people's behavior. Therefore, people are reacting to it. However, this kind of it is a pandemic situation, and it is for the good of everybody's well-being. This kind of measure should be temporarily executed, but then it has to be lifted at some point. That we have to have a trust in that. But if they are continue using it as if it is a normal thing, like tracking everybody and forbidding everybody going somewhere as if it's a normal thing for the government to do, then we have to have some voice about that, right? Once the thing is gone. Yeah. Okay, so I think we are up with the time. I actually measured my time and it's 11:08. That's 2 hours we had. Yeah, so I think we leave at this one right here, and then we continue our discussion on Discord, and then the homework and this the link will be posted on the discourse as well. Okay, so have fun. Thank you very much for your attention.
So please email us with any questions if you have any.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis.
No, thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Luis.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.